Hey there, welcome everyone. We are actually waiting for Kathleen. While we wait, oh boy, okay, she can't find the link. Hold on, I will text it to her and then um, give me a second. Why don't you drop in the chat where you're calling from, where you are, and what organization? I'll email it to her too. It's exciting. Here she is. Hey Diana. Hey
Hello.
Carrie. Hey Morgan. Hey Maya. Hey Kathleen.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Awesome. Happy
It's
Thursday.
fun. Happy Thursday. I love your rainbow over on the left. It's very hopeful.
Yes, Sophia and Caleb love. I let them choose like one artwork a day. It's about the most screen time my 4 and 6 year olds get these days. Hey, Christy. Let me figure out how to do the side by side. Um, and multi-speaker. No.
Multi-speaker, I think is yeah.
Well, we can just let you. Uh, they change it all the time on me. Oh
I
well.
know that yeah, Zoom Workplace keeps changing.
Um, awesome. Well, let's dive in. It's 1 o'clock. Thank you so much, everyone who's joining us and entering. I'm super excited, Kathleen, to catch up with you since your book has been released and hear how that is going and hear kind of draw your story out and draw on the inspiration for the book and then also what you learned, most importantly. Before we dive in, happy to just quickly introduce myself. My name is James. I joke that I'm a recovering charter school network founder and CEO for many years. I started and led Rocky Mountain Prep in Colorado, which was a wonderful experience for me. And in that experience, I started to get really worried about how our community and alumni and frankly all students, especially those furthest from opportunity, um, were thriving in the post-secondary education system. The majority of students who, Kathleen, you know this and heard me say this, but the majority of students who graduate Denver public schools and go to college are first in their families to do so. And the majority of those students go to Metro State University, which is a 4 year, well-regarded institution in our community. Um, any guesses? Maybe drop in the chat what your guess is for the 6 year graduation rate for a first gen kid in Metro. Kathleen, do you have a guess?
Let's see.
You know too much.
Yeah, 40%.
Okay, I see Morgan's got 60, you've got 40, Carrie's got 12. The 6 year graduation rate for a first gen student at Metro, which is an HSI and has some award on their front page about how well they serve first gen kids, is 24%.
Hmm.
And it led left me feeling pretty frustrated and upset that the vast majority of students who are trying to take the right next step towards economic mobility in their futures were failing through that system. And so that's what's led me to Willow Education to try and help students navigate and use a lot more outcomes data to understand what might be their purpose in life, what are careers that are a great fit for that, and then what are the right next steps that they can take towards that. And so we've built a curriculum and platform to help schools and K-12 systems support their students more effectively on that journey. That's how I got to know you, Kathleen. You're one of the sharpest thinkers in the space, obviously, and even pre-book through your work with design, Education Design Lab. Just to brag on your history a little bit, and then I want you to expand on it. You started your career at ABC as a broadcast journalist covering the White House and foreign affairs, and then went to AOL and you were a tech executive, And then you've been in philanthropy and worked for Sally Mae, and then you founded and led Education Design Lab. You stepped out of that recently and now are senior advisor for the Harvard Project on Workforce, which is a great group that I enjoy thought partnering with as well. Um, and now you've written this book, Who Needs College Anymore? Um, so let me be quiet and just ask you, tell us your journey from your words, like what got you excited and interested in this field?
Well, I would say that there was sort of a personal reason why I wrote the book and a professional reason. Um, I'll start with the professional reason, which is, like you said, I spent a number of years on the K-12 side of the house, probably a decade. I was all, caught up like everybody in the early 2000s, the College for All movement and this idea that um, when I was at Sally Mae, I started their foundation, the corporate foundation,
Hmm.
and we were very focused on how do we pick up where the business model leaves off? In other words, people who can't afford loans
Hmm.
or can't afford college, how do we help them see, and one thing we learned was that Americans, particularly lower income Americans, didn't even know that they had, they didn't know about Pell Grants. They didn't know about um, um, uh, subsidized, student loans. And so, part of my early work was trying to help figure out how do you help people see that college is possible. And then I worked in, as you say, in the philanthropy movement. I was at the Walton Family Foundation, working on the charter school advocacy team, and that was, fascinating. We picked 7 cities. This is where I met James
That's right.
because Denver was one of the cities where he was, starting this, kick-ass charter school that was one of the groups that we funded. Um, and so there were so many of us that were so excited about this idea that you could break the cycle of zip code destiny, right? Uh, and there seemed to be progress. More people were getting to college. But fast forward maybe 10 years to like 2010, and then the data started to come in,
Mhm.
and you're seeing the data, like exactly what you just said about Metro State, right? Where what's 24% of people who, we got them to college, the 4-year college, which is really the dream, and and it wasn't working out for them. And what really hit me around 2012, I would say, was I was on the board of a public university myself, and we were really struggling to, help students that were, what I call new majority learners, the ones for whom college was not originally designed. We, you know, we the university that I was really big on this idea of let's include everyone, let's make it work for them. And, we had pretty good outcomes, but when you saw the people that weren't getting in, that were getting left behind, and even the price tag at a public university was like, $30,000 by the time you got, through, room and board. And so a lot of people just weren't accessing this. And so that really got me thinking about how to work with some of the colleges that were passionate themselves about reinventing or disrupting themselves to actually design shorter pathways that were more attuned to the needs of, the new majority, which are the 62% of Americans who do not hold 4-year degrees, despite our best efforts of the last 30 years of college for all. I think I woke up, eventually and said to myself, and there were many others in this boat too, it's we're trying to put people into a box that isn't working for them. And is it tracking, or is it are we are is it the soft bigotry of low expectations? Are we not expecting enough of folks? And so, everybody was kind of nervous to say, well, maybe college isn't for everyone, because that sounds like, easy for me to say from a, wealthier, white, upper middle class background. My parents both went to college. It's easy for me to say that. And so I think it took a long time for people to kind of come out in the open and say, actually, many people are looking for a shorter pathway, but they want that pathway to lead to the same economic success options that that people who get the degree. And what's changed over this past decade, is that that's starting to be possible. And we can talk about the conditions where it is possible. And so then the narrative is way behind, right? And I love what you're doing, James, because you are trying to help level the playing field of different options that people have so they can see their options and not just be caught in that what I think is now outdated, it's college or bust mindset about your future and your efforts to reach the American dream. So that's my professional reason, and I can be very short on my personal reason, which is that
Please.
my own kids, we had an awful experience trying to get them into the college gauntlet and through it. And it was, pretty awful for both. I only have two kids and it was awful for both of them. And so that kind of, and one of them ended up going to college, one did not. So that for me put a personal, I was kind of otherized, from all the people around me whose kids were going to college here in, the DC area. And so I kind of became a little bit of a, I don't know, a rebel and a warrior, to help the other half, if you will, or the more than the other half.
Yeah, absolutely. And my understanding is both of your children are thriving today.
Yes.
uh, I love that story and that journey. Thank you. Something that sparks for me is just thinking about the College for All movement did have a lot of benefits. More people from low income backgrounds ended up going to college and completing, not as many as we hoped or wanted. And that opened up a lot of doors for many of those people.
Yeah.
But there's also a cost where there's just not an infrastructure built today in K-12 that supports the majority of students who don't end up with a degree 10 years later. There's no, right now it's nascent and building, and I think we're helping build a movement around this, but there's great supports and it's really clear like the K-12 system will help you advise figuring out what college you want to go to, what type of program, what fit schools are the right for you, what's a reach, what's a safety, et cetera. There's no analog or data system, and that's why we're starting Willow, and we do both, as you know. We think it's kind of a lazy question to think about, is it college or is it workforce? It like has to be both.
Mhm.
Um, but there's no analog or like the sets of structures and systems and scaffolds and supports within the system that allows us to do that for young people today. Um, as youth, so there's been like the College for All, the cost of that has been a dramatic underinvestment in preparing all young people and the majority of folks that don't end up with a bachelor to be successful in the workforce. Um, you did a ton of work. Before we go there, like, let me pause. We're a smaller group. Webinars are usually boring. Let's make this fun. So
Yeah.
if anything sparks for you that Kathleen shares, like come off mute, join the conversation,
Yeah,
ask your
absolutely.
question.
Be more
Um,
fun.
yes, so let's do that. If you're just having lunch quietly in the background, we get that too. Um, but Kathleen, like, what made you want to write this book?
Yeah, well, I feel like it's kind of what you just hinted at, which is that we need a kind of a wake-up call or a reality check at the way the system is set up to, disadvantage people who want to choose a different path. And not just, I mean, obviously, part of it's about can they get on a path that will be financially, lead to a family sustaining set of wages. That's obviously a question. But, you know, beyond that, the federal and state systems are set up to financially support people who, are going, are being driven off to college by their parents in, the family SUV to the leafy campus to spend 4 to 6 years, adultifying, even if they have no idea what they want to do. That's where the funding goes, and if you're like a single mom who is wants to do a short-term pathway in like, cybersecurity to get in on some of those great cybersecurity jobs, it's very doable, but you're paying out of pocket, usually. I mean, there, and one of the things that the lab is, we're working with community colleges to try to help them move those kinds of short-term certificates, which are becoming very popular, how to help move them into the for credit side of the college house, so that financial aid, they qualify for financial aid because, most of them, when we started this work, do not. And so, what it means is it definitely depresses or suppresses the market for, people who are not, don't have financial wherewithal to do these kinds of short-term pathways that, are becoming very viable, but the system doesn't support them. So I really wrote the book to try to elevate both what are the pathways that we see new majority learners like using workarounds to get to, and what are the employers doing? Because I have a chapter on employers. How are they doing workarounds, particularly if they're in a tight talent market where they can't find enough qualified people? What are early adopter high schools doing? And that's, what led me to high schools that are working with you to look to help students see multiple pathways. We also look at the CTE market and how that's changing. And then I have a chapter on colleges that looks at what are early adopter colleges doing to try to both offer short-term pathways, but also kind of be more realistic on how the market's changing and the fact that what learners want out of a four-year degree has a lot more to do with job, get me job ready than, make me a citizen of the world. I mean, we can lament that, and I do on a daily basis as an English major. But, the fact is, and I teach at George Mason University, students want to be delivered at the door of their first job. And so, how are early adopter colleges, taking that assignment on? And that's kind of a fun chapter as well.
Why don't we double click on that first? I want to kind of walk through some of the different highlights from from the different pathways that you've unearthed and some of the stories there. But what are some colleges doing to be more relevant or successful in this current context?
Well, one is like a hundred community colleges are working with the Education Design Lab
Yep.
to do these micro pathways, which are short term, 6 months, sometimes a year, and we work directly with industry in a region. Like right now, we're working with, let's say, West Texas, um, as they want to become a data center powerhouse in the country, and yet they don't have any workers who know how to do data, network security. And so, how do we help them create that talent pipeline and create jobs in West Texas? So that's an example where, the community colleges are becoming more of a broker of
Yep.
regional talent.
Yep.
And in some cases, working with the high schools too. We could talk about the high school involvement there. But so that's one model at the community college level. And
Yep.
then, the granddaddy of helping students, delivering students to the front door of their first job is Northeastern University and
Hmm.
in Boston, right? And I tell the story of how, they went from being, I guess the YMCA started that college in like the late 1800s. It was for Greek immigrants who had to work, but they wanted to help them upskill. This is in like the late 1800s. Uh, and so they, in their DNA, when they started, they were used to like helping adult learners get, combine work experience and school. And so they today are, they're like one of the hardest schools to get into in America. They only accept 6% of their
Wow.
of the students who apply. I know I took my daughter there back in the day, not that long ago, maybe a decade ago, and they had a little line. There was like 500 people there. They had a little line you could, and well, let me first say why they're so popular.
Hmm.
So they have the co-op program, which is famous now around the country, and the co-op program. What happens is you show up at Northeastern, you're there for your first semester, and then either end of your first year or early second year, you go off for an apprenticeship that they help you get in your major, in your field. And then if you don't like that, if you didn't like that apprenticeship, the next year you do a different one in a different field. So it becomes both career exploration and experience. And you're not paying tuition when you're going off and you're getting paid at your job. So it's really weaving school and work together in a way that, parents and students, I mean, love. I mean, so when I took my daughter there for the, I was excited for her to try to get in, but she was like a B plus student at an excellent high school. We stood in this little line that's where you could, that you'd show them your record and they would give you like an on the spot,
Huh.
don't bother. And we got the don't bother to apply, because there's no way she was going to get in. And so that the point is that consumers are looking for that now.
Mm-hmm.
and Northeastern's delivering it, but it was in their DNA to create. So it's harder for other universities and colleges to do that because the hardest part is lining up all the apprenticeships for your students. That's really hard, and to give up those tuition dollars. So, we don't have to go into any further than that, but those are kind of two examples of that I talk about in the how are colleges adapting to changing consumer demands about college.
When I describe your work at the Education Design Lab and now just the lab's work broadly, my first line of that answer, and I don't, you can correct me if you think I shouldn't say this, but is that you work to make community colleges more relevant, and in a challenging context where I think they haven't had a North Star. Too many institutions haven't had that North Star of like, how do we meet learners with where they are and prepare them for good jobs that are in demand in their communities. So the micro credential excuse me, the micro pathways work is super valuable and important. And we're a beneficiary of that in Colorado, where I do a lot of my work.
Yeah, well, I just to defend though, certainly community college's original mission was to offer 2-year degrees for people that, and there were plenty at that time in the, like just like 50, 60 years ago, there were plenty of jobs and careers where people felt, that a 2-year degree was, you still attract to a
Sufficient.
good job.
Yep.
And that now people, if they're going to go for a degree, they're tending to go straight to a 4-year, because
Hmm.
a lot of 4 years are offering the same kind. So there's been kind of I would say a commingling of of degree products between 2 years and 4 years. So they kind of need, yeah, they do need another mission. But I will say many of them are still very focused on being a transfer institution to 4 years,
Hmm.
and that works in some locales when you have a really good partner to be your 4-year partner.
Hmm. Um, what did you learn in the book about other pathways that are promising? Like, what are you most
Yeah,
excited about coming out of this experience?
yeah, we should touch on that. I would say that the two workarounds that were working best for both learners and employers. So when you talk to, when you sort of cross-reference it with both groups, both sides of the transaction, if you will, the answer is number one would be apprenticeship,
Hmm.
and number two would be industry certifications. So not, and by that, I don't mean just the kinds of certificates that you might get, like a Google IT certificate. Those are great for career exploration, but to actually as a hiring, as a validated uh, skill identifier, not as much. But the industry certifications, I mean, those are actually where you have basically taken a proctored test that says, I have
Hmm.
the skills to perform this this role.
Right.
And an example might be the in data network security, the Network Plus. I list several of them in the book in different
Hmm.
category, in different fields. There's a project management one from the
Yep.
Project Management Institute
Yep.
that is very helpful in getting hired to be a project manager. Um, and what I say in the book is that these are very effective, but they don't, there's not, there's, they're not available across all that many fields. They're
Yep.
usually available when it's a licensed role. So there's some in healthcare,
Yep.
um, you know, uh, to be in a certain, kinds of like a nurse's aide, and you have to know CPR, or some
Yep.
of the licenses that relate to truck driving, like this, certified truck driver license, very effective in folks getting hired. But they tend to deal with safety issues. But if you could take that construct, which design thinking, in that methodology that we
Hmm.
use, you take a construct and you try to think about how does this analogy work across fields. In the book, I certainly push for this, and we do this at the lab too, is how can you credentialize more job roles or the skills within job roles so
Yep.
that people could qualify for those jobs without having this sort of blanket piece of paper that says, yeah, I got a degree in cybersecurity. Well, if you broke that down and said
Hmm.
to a series of micro credentials with certifications, the job market and college would look very different. And I think we're headed there, but I'm just not quite sure how it's going to work out on the soft skills side of the house, or the
Hmm.
what we now try to call durable skills side of the house.
Yeah, we're building a durable skills assessment right now into our
Mm,
curriculum and platform,
are you?
and we are. This is an update for you. We're the going to be the. It's not public yet, so don't tweet it out. But the first post career exploration and post secondary exploration and planning curriculum and platform that is a licensed partner of America Succeeds Durable Skills
Oh, nice.
work.
Yes.
And so we're excited about that, and we'll have pre and post assessments on what that looks like. And I am honestly in the whole skills-based hiring movement. I am skeptical-ish on it entirely because it's overly complex, and I don't think employers are incentivized enough to care about it, except in the tightest labor markets. So I think
Hmm.
healthcare is a good
Hmm.
exception. Tech has been, but that's softening a lot, and so I
Hmm.
want to see how that plays out.
Right. No, you're absolutely right.
So we'll see. And we still believe it's important for students to be explicitly taught and practiced and assessed against these durable skills, which do matter more to life outcomes and success, usually in most fields, than technical skills, which a CompTIA A++ cert would assess or whatever.
Hmm.
Um, as you think about apprenticeships, my last webinars, I think was with Mallory, who founded Reach
Mm.
University
Hmm.
and then Craft Education is at Western Governors now, leading Craft. Um, and like current context aside, um, apprenticeships have been really powerful in uh, more limited use cases thus far. Like, what do you see as the roadblocks and pathway to bringing apprenticeships to scale most effectively? And like, what gives you optimism and what gives you worry about that?
Yeah, well, the optimism really comes from the model itself and how effective it is.
Hmm.
And we do see employers say that there are many studies that show that ROI for them is increased by hiring apprentices because their acquisition costs for hiring and training are lowered, even though you might be taking on someone in a step ladder approach and hiring them to do, a junior version of the job that they would graduate into. So it's a lot of work for employers, and I think that's the biggest barrier right now. Um, Friends of mine who were, directly in the federal apprenticeship advocacy movement would say, said to me, don't say it's a lot of work to employers, because actually they feel that the bigger impediment is the fact that the federal investment in programs like apprenticeships is like 50 times less than
It's too
than
low.
what we're investing in higher
Hmm.
in college, in the
Hmm.
degree itself, actually. So if you even upped it by, you know 10 times or 20 times or 30 times, you would see, and you incented employers to basically become learning providers, right?
Yep.
And blurred the line further between school and work. Um, I think that you would see apprenticeship would win the day. I mean, not that it would. I'm not saying, there'll still be people, and I'm very much pro college, pro university, as you are too. I think
Yep.
we're for it. We just want other options to be elevated alongside it, and the financial constraints or the funding constraints are
Yep.
probably the biggest thing. But with apprenticeships, the second biggest thing is employers have to, it's like it's not easy to organize apprenticeships at first. And I feature different companies in the book, including
Yep.
one in Colorado, right? That's an insurance company that has found it very beneficial.
Pinnacle.
Pinnacle.
Yep. Excellent. Um, I've got two questions. I'm trying to decide where to go, and just encourage folks who are listening in to join us, and drop questions in the chat, or come off and jump into the conversation. We'll save 15, 20 minutes for Q&A at the end, here in about 10 minutes. Um, what you interviewed many learners, many students in the book. What was one of your favorite student learnings,
Stories.
yeah, and stories. Yeah.
Um, well, one of my favorites, I couldn't meet him in person because he has a security clearance and he was worried about, but I zoomed with him, and his first name is Patrick, and he lives in my area and actually went to like the next door high school to
Mm,
me. Um, and he in high school was getting these industry certifications in network security, like we just talked about.
yeah.
He got a couple of them. He just like signed up for, what used to be like shop class when I was going to high school, which is
Yeah.
now, now you can do different kinds of tech certificates in, at least in the high schools, in many locations, you can actually earn certificates as part of high school classes.
Yeah.
And he was just interested. And he said the courses were really competitive to get into because everybody wanted to, work with their hands. And he signed up and he felt like he wasn't college material. He applied to one college here in Virginia and he didn't get in.
Hmm.
Um, and so he thought, I guess I'm going to community college. And so we thought, well, let me put my resume out on Indeed, you know, to get a summer job. And he got snapped up by AWS um, and hired, at a good salary. And it was at first on contract, and then he got a full-time job, and then he parlayed that into a junior software engineering job at another company, Khaki, down the road. And so I'm interviewing by the time I'm interviewing him, he's 23, and he is just such an engaging guy. And he described how he sort of hacked his way into these different jobs. And he's making like $125,000 now a year. And he said that he went to community college like at night for a little while. But he said by the time he got these different promotions and had all these certificates and like, programs that he knew how to run and could, people would vouch for him. He's like, I don't think I would even put community college on my resume anymore. So he stopped trying to get the piece of paper, which he
Yeah.
thought, he'd been ingrained to think that he needed. I mean, so I found a lot of people like that, and
Yeah.
some of them will say, I had a lot of FOMO, fear of missing out when my friends went to college and I didn't go. Um, they get over that, like my daughter who didn't go. I mean, by the time she was 25, she was over that, but at first it was hard because she, sort of was like really questioning her decision not to go. And so she has a quote in the book about that. But I feel like people. Uh, what they many of them say, I would love to get the piece of paper someday, but really just for my own, just because I love to learn. I mean, a lot of the people who were the workaround people who were figuring out hacks to the degree were people with a kind of self-motivation and a love of learning. It
Yeah.
was kind of interesting. It's kind of counterintuitive, but they were people who were self-motivated to figure out things on their own,
Yeah.
which I think is one of the interesting, I have a chapter on who actually does need a degree today and
Hmm.
who could afford to skip the degree process. And like self-motivation is one of the key factors in for the people who could afford to
Hmm.
go different routes, assuming they don't want a career of like as a doctor or
Hmm.
a registered nurse. I mean, there's some careers where you have no choice. You're going to college because
Yeah.
that's a clinical psychologist, physical therapist, accountant, minister. I list all the jobs in the book that you have to have the piece of paper for, but that is changing.
Do you think that students who skip the degree, they need the hacking mindset and love of learning and figuring it
Hmm.
out? Do you think they need that because we haven't societally constructed a system to support students through
Yes,
non-college pathways?
that's very well said. I actually describe it at one point as like it's kind of like a gamified quest, uh,
Hmm.
and only right now it's set up that only the intrepid can figure it out.
Right.
But or someone I have one of my categories I call connected career switcher, and I use the word connected because and that my daughter is the example in that case. So
Mm.
she had me, right?
Hmm.
So she didn't have to be intrepid because I was able to say, "Oh, look, you can go over here to General Assembly and take this part-time boot camp during COVID and
Hmm.
get and get certified in digital marketing, which is what she did,
Right.
and we'll help you pay for it.
Yep.
And that was how she hacked college.
Yep.
Um, but so you either need a network of people who can help you, or you need to be, a motivated DIYer is what I call another category.
Right. Well, that pulls on an important thread that Raj Chetty and Julia Fisher Freeman have
Hmm.
done great research around the importance of building social capital, regardless of which pathway you're going through, for students
Absolutely.
that don't have access to that
Right. And
social
and that's
capital.
what on the flip side, that's one of the categories of people who I say still really absolutely the degree is highly recommended are people who don't have the social capital and don't really know how to get it. I
Hmm.
all like class transporters is one category that I feature. Um, in fact, you introduced me to a family that I feature in that descriptor,
Hmm.
where the mom was a migrant laborer who was hell bent on her kids
Hmm.
having what she didn't have, and so she really wanted them to go to college, and
Yeah.
she really to kind of have the support system around them that she felt that she didn't get.
Yeah. Well, she almost threw me out of her house when I was having dinner with them, and Sebastian, the older son, he's a senior this year, and he's actually applied to and been accepted into colleges. But last year he was hell bent on not going to college,
That's right. Oh, so now has he changed his mind? That's good.
and he's considering still.
He's considering. He's
Um,
at least applied. Yeah.
and I said, Sebastian, because he loves the idea of skilled trades. He wants to become an electrician. And I said, Sebastian, there are some great opportunities and pathways into that in Denver. They're not easy to find and connect to, but like that's exactly what we're doing, and I'm happy to help with you. And Daniela said, James Cryan. She almost threw me out of that house.
Yeah.
Okay, I see a great question in the chat here. Carrie, you want to come off mute and ask it?
It's not really a question. It's just kind of thoughts as you guys are discussing, talking about those soft, or what I like to call as professional skills.
Mhm.
We've got to start that a lot sooner than even middle school or high school. They're already in patterns at that point, and so these have to be habits. Using manners; those are habits.
Mhm.
And so that has to be, and yes, and a lot of this comes back to the family unit, which is broken. However, schools, I believe, overall can do a lot more, um, as far as building upon this. And I know, and also, resilience, perseverance, a lot of that also comes from home. But I think we could do more as a society, and as public school systems, and even private, to build resilience and perseverance. And we keep trying. We don't quit if we fail the first time.
Hmm.
And I know our local high schools, I'm in workforce development, and we have multiple programs for our students, working with area businesses, area colleges, and that we have pre-apprenticeships for our students that will knock off years, at least 1 year into an apprenticeship program, say our plumbers and pipe fitters union, that,
Hmm.
they're going to be graduating high school, that taking 1 year off, they only have 3 years left to go, and earning close to $27 an hour, while they're learning.
Yeah.
And so we have kind of championed that in our area, and we're very proud of those programs. But there are so many options for our kids, if they will take advantage of those. So not really a question, just lots of comments.
No, amazing. Yeah.
Carrie, where are you? Before I ask Kathleen her reactions to that,
We're
where
in
are you?
Guernsey County in Ohio.
Great. And do kids know about these options?
Oh
That's the
yes,
problem I'm working on.
we have career navigators
Great.
in our schools, and so they work alongside our school counselors, and that is part of my job, is to go out and help. We have a team that we build these programs and these
Yep.
pre-apprenticeships in multiple industries,
Hmm.
and so it's been phenomenal. But yes, the kids are very, very aware.
Very
of
cool.
these programs, and we've seen a lot of success. And some, for whatever reason, don't take advantage of them, but every opportunity is there.
Awesome. I love it. Kathleen, what's your take on that?
Yeah, that's fabulous. And I also see Matthew has his hand up we should get to next. But just to react to that, wow. I mean, I do think that the demand for these pre-apprenticeships is so intense that it just kind of makes you say, well, why aren't we designing the system this way? I was on a panel last night or yesterday with at the New America, which is a think tank in DC, and we had an apprentice
Hmm.
who he didn't go to college. He's now working at Accenture in the tech field, and he
Accenture
said
has a great apprenticeship program.
he
Sorry.
said, my life was changed when our counselor, probably the person in your role, Carrie, came to class one day and mentioned these apprenticeships. And he said, that changed my life. He said, I raised my hand and I said, I want to do it. And look where I am. And so he was so grateful and wanted to like pay it forward and tell other people about apprenticeships. So thank you. It's
Yeah,
great.
thanks. Thanks so much.
I'm also going to put something in the chat, which is micro credentials that the lab has created around durable skills, some of the skills you were describing. They're not necessarily geared right now towards younger high school students or middle school students, but we are talking about like how could we do that? So, if you do take a look at them, I'd love to see how you react to them and how you think they needed to be, customized to a younger audience.
Yeah, well, great. That'd be
I'll put that
wonderful.
in the chat.
We're doing that work right now. And Carrie, that builds on your point. We think that has to be taught explicitly and reinforced and explored through every part of the curriculum and content. And we build a curriculum and then a platform that is designed. Usually, it's used in an advisory period of high schools, and most high schools don't have a curriculum for that time. It's kind of like a come hang out and get ready for the day. But we think that's could be a really powerful time, and so that's our bet that we're making and way that we're helping high schools do this work more intentionally to prepare for great programs such as yours. All right, Matthew. Sorry to wait for a minute. Excited to hear what your question is.
Hi, thanks for hosting this. My question is kind of more of like a mindset question for you, Kathleen, because the
Mhm.
area that I've sort of paid the most attention is like kind of workforce Pell, those expanding Pell grants,
Yeah.
excuse me,
Yeah. I just had a cough too.
to short-term programs. And so it just seems like, from my perspective, what I've seen, a lot of the hang up is just sort of measuring outcomes and, the best way to provide oversight. So for my mindset question for you is just like, is that kind of like the wrong way to address this? Should we just allow like some experimentation in this space and then
Yeah.
figure out what works after the fact? Or is it important to sort of have these parameters before, especially for federal financial aid, you go
Yeah.
all in?
That's such a great insight on your part.
Hmm.
And, like we can in my hometown, Washington, D.C. right now. And I do. But the one, there, I have posted about the fact that there's maybe a little bit of a silver lining in the fact that I do think that the Trump administration has a little bit of the mindset you're describing when it comes to saying, don't let the enemy be the perfect of the good. Maybe we should allow short-term funding to be experimented with in different locales. I mean, that's why it's been held up for years, is that particularly the Democrats, but all of us are so upset by what happened with the diploma mills and how the private colleges were taking people's federal financial aid and not delivering outcomes, that it's kind of been like it's kind of frozen any innovation. And so, there have been experiments with like boot camps in colleges and this sort of thing in the last, like back to the Obama administration, but they haven't been allowed to get codified into federal law because of the concerns, as you say, about outcomes and how do we track them. So all of the short-term programs that I mentioned that are, that like the single mom that wanted to do cybersecurity might need. The bad news is those are not tracked. And so we do have to figure out how do we even track where the money's going and what kind of the outcomes are. So, there will be a lot of work as we start to unbundle the degree and micro credentialize more of learning and training. There's going to be a lot of work to track, what works. And so, but I do think we should jump in with experiment, with sort of tightly fenced experiments. So I'm with you on that. If that's your mindset, I didn't mean to read more into what you were saying than what you said.
I appreciate that. It's just not a perspective that's brought up on Capitol Hill very often, so I think that's helpful to
No,
hear.
no, you're right. You're absolutely right. And it looks like, by the way, it looks like short-term Pell is going to pass. And for the others on the call that don't know, really what that is, it's really allowing federal financial aid, you as a student to use it for a short-term program. Right now, mainly you have to be in college like at least half time to qualify in most cases for federal financial aid.
Matthew, where are you calling from?
I'm down in Miami, Florida.
Hmm.
And do you any professional affiliation that sparks your interest, or is this personal curiosity as well?
I am a reporter covering higher ed, so
Hmm.
I don't even remember how I saw this webinar. I think I just
Hmm.
saw it someplace across my LinkedIn, and I had some free time, so now I'm here.
Oh, that's
Okay.
great. Well, we need education reporters right now more than ever. So thank you for what you do.
I think two thoughts that might be helpful to your question, building off what Kathleen shared. One is we fund known bad options with known negative ROI in higher education today. So just because we have the visibility doesn't mean the funding is any different. I believe we should have the visibility and build a system for that long term. And there's a lot of states who are building state data, longitudinal data systems.
Mhm.
Which help connect K-12 into post-secondary, both college and not, into workforce outcomes and IRS or Department of Labor data
Mhm.
sets. Um, and I think that's important and needed work. There's a group in Colorado called CEMI, CEEMI, and a guy named Roger Lowe, who's leading a lot of work around this in Colorado to do rigorous research-based studies on the outcomes from the best workforce programs specifically, so that we can start flowing state and federal dollars towards those programs. And the governor just announced a $20 million investment from the state and from Arnold Foundation
That's
into
amazing.
Colorado workforce programs yesterday or the day before.
Wow. And the lab, the organization that am affiliated with is doing something called the Data CoLab, which is trying to help community colleges begin to track outcomes for their students in, short-term programs and non-credit programs. But that's, it's a journey, but it has started.
Yeah, it's super important work. Raj Chetty obviously has access to the IRS database and has done great research
Mhm.
more broadly, but not he can't tie it to the specific programs that students are going through. Um, Other questions?
Thank you.
Kathleen, I I would love for you to answer your title literally, and you alluded to it a little bit, but who does need
Yeah.
college these days? And how do you define, I know you make this argument, but make your argument of how we should be thinking about and defining what college is.
So there has been some resistance to the title of the book,
Yes.
um, where people say, how can you, beat up on college, particularly at this moment, right? When lots of other people are beating up on the idea of the university. And what I say is the when you say the name of the book, it's really about who needs college anymore, not that nobody needs college anymore.
Hmm.
So it's not meant to be disparaging of college. I I argue that we need to expand the definition of college so that the degree, a full-on degree, and everything we love about it, right, is one product in a continuum of products that serve the
Hmm.
needs of the whole 100%, or the whole 100% of adult Americans, or nearly adult Americans, who want a learning path, right? So that you have short-term programs, you have apprenticeships, you have programs like Year Up, or
Hmm.
or with strong wraparound services, that why can't all of those qualify as a form of college alongside the degree? Because people might have, well, they do. We know they have different needs, and you shouldn't be shut out of the route to a quote good job or a professional pathway because you don't have that piece of paper. And I think more and more people are starting to realize that that there's this disparity, and we're certainly reminded of it when we see the, let's call it the diploma divide, which you could attribute at least in part, right, to the the economic divide of people between haves and have-nots, and the
Hmm.
resentment that has built up. I mean, I think it's partly responsible, and many others have said this, for for instance, the outcome of the 2024 election that
Hmm.
surprised many people.
Yeah. Ezra Klein had some guests on in his latest podcast this week, a pollster and strategist who said the largest explainer and largest movement over the past 30 years in our political divide has been along education lines
Hmm.
and no other line. Um, so certainly people are making that argument loudly. Um, how do you think school systems should be supporting and navigators like workforce boards supporting young people trying to figure this out? Like, what do you think is needed in this space?
Well, certainly the comments Carrie made about the early career exposure programs
Hmm.
is one piece of it. I like what New York City is doing, where high school now is becoming, everybody does at least one apprenticeship, or they're piloting this new model in 15% of the schools. So it's not universal yet,
Mm.
but they're trying it out. This idea that everybody has an apprenticeship, that the vo-tech, or the career and technical education part of high school, is not, it's not an either or, that it gets uh, spread through your curriculum in high school, so that you're getting technical skills and college prep skills, and you don't have
Hmm.
to choose. I mean,
Right.
when I went to high school, the some of the kids would just sort of disappear in 10th grade,
Mm.
and that you then see them out back in their, beauty school smocks, or with their auto mechanic coveralls on,
Hmm.
and they just sort of disappeared because they were off the college track. Well, the lines between what we used to call blue collar jobs and white collar jobs have really blurred now. And some of the quote, CTE, or career and technical tracks, have like more math requirements, to be a fiber optic specialist, or working in a BMW plant. You need
Yep.
more math than
Yep.
you would for uh, all those jobs where we can now just ask Chat GPT, right?
Hmm.
And so I really think high schools in particular are starting to get that. States are starting to get that.
Yep.
Regions like Carrie's in Ohio are starting to
Yep.
get that. And I'm excited about that. I profile several of them in the book, how it's all
Hmm.
kind of merging. I do South Carolina as one of the places. Denver is
Hmm.
one of the places that I profile. Northern Virginia.
Absolutely. Jobs for the Future calls that the big blur between
Yeah.
education, K-12, higher education, and
Hmm.
workforce. Last question that I have is, as AI is developing and kind of nascent in its societal and labor market impacts right now, but developing quickly, how do you think that fits into this piece of the puzzle? I know you didn't tackle it explicitly, or it was
Well, I,
the
I did
book,
I did tackle it a little bit. I mean, I didn't have a whole
right?
chapter on it, but
Right.
I
That
it's woven in. But I was a little bit careful because
it was so
it
early,
changes so
even a year
quickly, right?
ago. Yeah, totally.
Exactly. But what we could say then, and which is even more sharply in view now, is that there are some serious pros, like positives for learners, and
Hmm.
those of us who support them uh, with regard to AI, and there are some serious challenges. I'll just name maybe two on each side. On
Sure.
the plus side, the wonderful side, I paint a picture of like a GPS system that is really a career navigation system that I think
Yep.
within 5 years assuming certain things work out in terms of data, we
Hmm.
will be able to, plug in a career destination and look at all the points along the way, all the skills that build towards it,
Yep.
and how we can get there. Meaning, like, what program do you need over here? What Google certificate do you need over here? What kind of
Yep.
apprenticeships are available? Like, all this is going to come into view. There'll be visibility for the learner. I think that's really exciting.
Yep.
Another exciting thing that AI, has already delivered for us is the ability to make your resume like speak
Hmm.
exactly to what employers care about, right?
Yep.
The problem is, and so now we'll go to the negative side. On the negative side, everybody's resume looks exactly the same, right?
Right.
Because we're all using the same AI agents, right? And so employers are just, for one, they're getting more resumes, and then secondly, they're completely perplexed by how do we differentiate any of these. So this is why work experience and the internships and the apprenticeships become so important. So that's one of the negatives. And then I think the second negative is we're starting to see early research that those entry level jobs on the white collar side, are being are contracting,
Yep.
because you don't need as many people when you can, ask ChatGPT to do that research or write that marketing plan or get you quotes for, freight costs. All that stuff can be done so easily,
Mm.
um, that we're already starting to see jobs affected by it.
Right.
And Burning Glass and Harvard
Yeah.
just did a study on that, which I recommend.
I was just gonna point that out that that study, and I think the stat is, and you can correct me if I'm remembering here, but the um, labor market outcomes for early college grads are actually now worse than for students that started but didn't complete college,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah, I'm not sure.
first time that's happened in a long time, and that's
Mhm.
quasi shocking
Yeah.
um, in terms of employment, not like in terms of salary overall. Um,
Right.
Well, we are at time. So I just want to say thank you, Kathleen, for your work, for helping raise awareness and build movements around building secondary and pipelines to workforce and quality jobs that are inclusive for all people, not just those of us that have gone to college. And I think that's really important work. So I appreciate your mentorship and your friendship and your support to me personally, but then more importantly to the country as we're all trying to figure this out.
Well, thank you, and thanks for what you're doing. I'm excited. I talked about it. I talked about you and your work on the New America panel yesterday. So hopefully, we're sending school districts your way.
Well, thank
I'd
you.
love
We're
to be able to put in the chat the I'll put the name of the website for the book in case anyone
yes.
wants to either buy the book or you could there's discussion guides too if you want to like start a conversation in your own I think this is right. Who needs Yes,
Looks
make
good to
sure I
me.
spelled
Yeah.
it right. In case you want to have a discussion in your own town. And there's also several articles and podcasts from the book and reviews and whatnot. So thank you.
Absolutely. Well, awesome. This was great. Thank you for joining us, everyone. Carrie and Matthew, thanks for your questions. And
Yeah.
onward. Let's go build a great system that works for all people.
Okay. Bye-bye,
Thanks,
everyone.
Kathleen.
Thanks.
Take care. Thanks, Diana.